I had a lot of hope going into the First Descendant. As a long-standing Destiny fan, I wanted something that pushed it to be better. That ultimately didn't happen. The original release mirrored a lot of the issues found in, well, Destiny's original launch. This resulted in an understandable 56 open critic average. Despite the score, Nexon took the feedback to heart and made a substantial number of changes. With the First Descendant celebrating its first anniversary and big plans for the future, it seemed like the perfect time to see if this is an experience worth returning for. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep this section brief. I played the First Descendant hardcore at launch, and ultimately threw in the towel after roughly a week. I originally planned on doing this re-review with Inez's release. Around that time I unlocked her, the meta weapons, but was unfortunately let go from my gaming news and review job before I could finish. I then repeated the process with Ultimate Blur's release. It got delayed, so I settled on the anniversary. The basic point being, this re-review is going to be comprised of my thoughts throughout these 4 points, as there is a lot of overlap. Some good, others bad, but I do think it will be helpful for those thinking of returning, as my perspective is very close to that. In my original review, I had 2 basic issues with the First Descendant. The first was the insane grind. It wasn't just waiting 5 minutes for the event to spawn, it was the entire process. First you'd need a rare drop from the aforementioned event, then a specific element character was needed to unlock the event for a small number of materials. Once enough were obtained, you could go to a certain spot and summon a boss. And after all of that, there was a 94% chance you'd have to repeat the process. Even grinding invasions were a pain, as you'd be limited to 250%, with no matchmaking. Seriously, it was so bad your options were something like 40 hours of mindless grinding, or just throwing 50 bucks at the problem. Thankfully, almost everything mentioned here was corrected. Events take 30 seconds to spawn, they have a pity mechanic, materials drop from normal enemies, there's an item that inverts your chances, and a harder version of invasions with matchmaking. Seriously, amazing step forward. There are also a ton of catch-up mechanics, a weekend vendor that sells items for a modest fee, and several events to further reduce the grind. It really is to the point where a newcomer could read my original review and question whether we played the same game. There are also a lot of small quality of life changes, like making Enzo, who helps obtain a specific resource, is among the easiest Descendants to get. As for the other problem, I never felt like the grind was worthwhile, and I still think that's true. What I always disliked about the endgame is players are grinding to reduce the, well, grind. There isn't a spectacle activity like Destiny's Raid, it's just the same stuff with bigger numbers. Regardless of how someone feels about this approach, there is absolutely a place for power fantasy games. Borderlands is another game I would say is in balance, but that never stopped me from having fun. Here, the issue is somewhat complicated.
Transfer. Attack their deployment.
On a basic level, it sucks knowing certain Descendants are just a cut above. At the time of launch, that was Bunny and Glay, with Inez and Serena taking that to another level. It is honestly crazy Inez is so powerful I can play the game one-handed with a pro controller. Her skills do all of the work. And it's not only easy, it outperforms almost every character. And this is after people were mad about her being nerfed. Serena isn't quite as mindless. Since she's gun-based, you actually have to aim, but outside of that, it's pretty easy. Though, having an option on each side makes things extremely difficult to balance. Where this is perhaps most notable is the Void Intercept Battle Challenge boss. Of the 28 Descendants currently available, half do not have a solo clear. Now, to be clear, these numbers are somewhat deceptive, like one person beat it with Freyna, yet no one has beat it with Ultimate Freyna, so I don't think there's anything that's actually stopping her from doing it besides player desire. There are also a lot of them that are in the 10 to 30 range. This is going to be situations where determined players beat the odds, which is awesome and really speaks to the build crafting potential that I'll get into later, but not great in terms of balance. And it would be one thing if this system highlighted specific Descendants. Ezimo having the lowest time is exactly what you want to see. There isn't anything wrong with specialized content that encourages players to obtain specific characters. It's just sad when Serena is arguably the 3rd best here and literally everywhere else. Where Descendant Balance is most noticeable is multiplayer. While I get some people don't like content that requires other people, the First Descendant does it in a way that is irrelevant to even being detrimental. A lot of people complain about AFKers in some multiplayer content, but the honest truth is there isn't much difference when played with the right Descendants. Without giving it my all to keep up, I've had runs where people cleared things before I can even get there. This was especially bad if I bothered to take a moment for loot. Even something as inconsequential as 20-second delay could mean you're playing catch up for the rest of the run. Even when I give it my all, the time would go from being like 2 minutes to being, well, 2 minutes. Like, it's great if no one else is carrying, but outside of that, it just feels like a mad dash to just do something. Bosses take this to the extreme. With a good build, many can be dropped in a second. And I mean like literally 1 second. I found a helpful site made by Vash that lists all but the most recent boss's stats. Doing the math, I consistently got 3.2 times modifier when playing with 4 people. So if I can defeat a boss in 1 second solo, that's now like 4 to 8 seconds. The time is obviously going to be slightly inflated due to dips like reloading. But it really doesn't result in a great experience for anyone. On a basic level, it's much better to just do the bosses solo. It will always be faster, as I don't need to find people, have them load up, and the boss has less overall health. The only real benefit is helping people, which is great. But at the same time, I find the experience deflating as a newcomer. These were bosses that people were failing to defeat in 10 minutes on week 1. At least then you got to fully experience the mechanics, see their moves, feel the impact of their attacks. All of that reduced to a blink and you might miss an event.
This is divine punishment.
The other problem is the limited time super bosses. When I originally planned on doing this re-review, Tormentor was the featured boss. My best attempt was 4 seconds solo. I imagine I could have got it down to 2 seconds following a different guide, but at that point it's a question of how many resources do I want to burn for a 2-second decrease. When I attempted this in co-op, my time skyrocketed to 40 seconds, and based off the previous site, I did 85% of the damage. The current boss has much higher overall stats, to the point where they'd fit right in with Descaya. But the outcome isn't that different. I slightly modified my previous build and was able to get the time down to 90 seconds. Top times are in the 4-second range, so that is another example of grinding to reduce the grind. I can use my current build and take longer, or grind for another weapon, use a bunch of resources, and do it in a fraction of the time. I attempted the same co-op test, finished at 3 minutes and 40 seconds with approximately 53% of the damage done. And to me, that is the core problem. There really isn't a reason to bother with online unless you absolutely need the help. It turns what should be a fun activity with other people to a pointless abyss of hoping whomever you match with does the heavy lifting. And that isn't to say there aren't people who do it. I specifically did it expecting to carry both teams. It just isn't a great experience for anyone. Something that becomes even more of a problem when you consider how easy the grind actually is. Now, at this point, I've been rather negative about the First Descendant. I assure you, I wouldn't re-review a game just to say it sucks. That isn't something I'd do unless I was obligated to cover a title. And while I started this section on a negative note, I think the accessible grind is something that will resonate with a lot of people. As a person who also plays Destiny 2, it's one of the biggest complaints, and it isn't shocking. Every now and then luck will be on your side, but it is so easy to end up playing countless hours in hopes of getting that marginally better loot. Just getting the basic drops from right out of the 9 took me longer than getting the actual title. And I have no clue how much time it would take to get them all in shiny, or if I wanted to go all out adept shiny. Here, it is a bit more predictable. At the time of writing this review, the go-to weapon is the Last Dagger. It is obtained as a 20% drop from a couple basic missions. The quickest mission was like 90 seconds and the longest hit 4 minutes. Due to its placement, it is an item that you can utilize the pity system on. That means you're guaranteed the drop in 6 attempts. Since it takes 5 sets to max it out, with the worst luck and time, it's about an 8-hour grind. Realistically though, it's up to 4 hours. And the nice thing is most of these drops simply enhance the weapon, so you can play around with it in just an hour of grinding. Well, after crafting it, of course. Getting weapon levels via 400% are also insanely fast. I was averaging 2 minutes a mission and finishing a weapon in 5 or so runs. This comes out to be in 2 to 3 hours once you factor in fluctuations and loading times. Leveling a character is just as easy, with Serena being among the easiest to obtain. She also has a pity, and just drops from Sigma sectors. In fact, the hardest part is probably obtaining the energy activators and crystallization catalysts. It takes 2 activators and 20 catalysts to match my current build. Right now, there is the first anniversary event, which gives 2 activators and 8 catalysts away for minimal work. That's basically half the battle. Realistically, most of the time will just be waiting, 16 hours for the character, 8 hours for the character parts, 7.5 hours for the catalyst, 4 hours for the weapon, and 2 hours for the weapon parts. All of this adds up rather quickly, though obviously can be done concurrently. However, I don't think this approach is bad for casual players. You could spend an hour just getting catalyst materials and probably have enough where all you need to do is sign on, collect, and redo. It would be even easier if they managed to get the newly released application to do it. Or at least I saw posts indicating that was part of the long-term plan. Anyway, you could theoretically go from a new post-game player to besting the super boss in roughly 15 in-game hours. And this assumes grinding the entire time. Daily logins and the aforementioned anniversary event gives 4 weapons. It isn't optimal to use them for the last dagger, but it's an option if you are looking to just jump into things. There's also a weekend vendor that usually sells materials to make a single catalyst each week, on top of a handful of other materials. That is honestly largely how I stockpiled for the specific review. I just signed on, went to the vendor, and collected whatever goodies were sent to my inbox. Now, I am discounting gold, Kipler shards, and the modules you need. Those are slightly more complicated grinds, but I really don't want to get lost in the weeds. Not to mention, those are passive grinds that can also be improved via events. The same events also sell 30% experience boost items. Like I said, there are a lot of ways to get straight to the fun stuff. In the end, that is kind of the whole thing with the grind. Even if the other characters offer benefits, or are fun to play, they're not really needed. My reworked Serena build was enough to win the challenge battle. I got a terrible time, but it is the hardest task and it only needs to be done once. It also helps that there are a lot of quality of life improvements. I love that the dog collects all my loot, and the filter gets rid of all the junk taking up space. Several grinds were also improved. One of the most notable was reactor perks, which can now be enhanced. Getting the perfect one with a gold and a blue is no longer a disappointing outcome. I can just invest materials and match both of them. Components are also a lot easier to obtain and can be enhanced with more health and defense. Not only does this add more customization, it increases build crafting. While a lot of people will likely just follow those who run the numbers, the First Descendant build crafting is surprisingly robust. Prior to hitting my 4-second time on Tormentor, I was following a different build for like 6 seconds. All it really took was a different arch tuning, which is a newer quasi-leveling system that allows players to obtain additional stats, and changing 2 modules. I also saw people saying they got that previous build down to 5 seconds by just changing 2 components. Things like this are really cool. I love that there are multiple paths to a meta build, and players are rewarded for having a good understanding of the options. It is very different from similar games where many are stuck following the strictest of metas. Even if the 2-second build can theoretically do twice as much damage, many would be fine with a suboptimal 10 seconds. It is so inconsequential, which allows them to focus on fun. Plus, the metas thus far have lasted a while. I won't be surprised if Serena or The Last Dagger falls out of favor when the next episode releases. Both have remained staples for months now. But whatever replaces them likely won't be an absurd grind. Plus, some of the changes have resulted in more interesting options. At one point, I know defense modules were considered a must. They still have value, but it's nice knowing components can go up to 150% health, equally sizable shielding, plus thousands in free defense. In the end, the First Descendant has kind of settled into a looter where you can achieve the power fantasy. It simply isn't like Destiny where you'll spend hundreds of hours to get a marginally better weapon in hopes of the next top tier activity being manageable. While this, like everything, comes with a cost, it seems to be one that many are fine with paying, given several bosses have already seen their mechanics simplified, and an update pushing the experience to be more casual friendly. It's unlikely things will shift. Sure, there is the Atson Plains coming, the next super boss is based off Stalker who has team-based mechanics and more. I just don't see a massive shift coming, and that's honestly fine. Even if it's clear this is not a direction I personally care for, most comments I see are from people content with this approach. If anything, it says a lot about how innately fun the First Descendant is, as I keep getting pulled back in. I also recognize that different levels of commitment are important. I couldn't keep up with multiple games demanding daily attention. Here I can sign in, play for 20 minutes, and stockpile resources. I already have enough where I can match the next character, Nell, and get my weapons ready for the new trigger module system. Anyway, I've rambled enough. My point is pretty simple. Odds are if you're watching this review, you enjoy the First Descendant enough to consider returning. So it just comes down to what your issue ultimately was. If it was a horrible grind preventing you from enjoying everything it has to offer, you'll certainly be happy. In most senses, the game has strictly improved. The only area it struggles with is challenge and multiplayer, and at this point, I don't see that changing. Hey, sorry, I don't normally do postscripts, but I did want to take a moment to express how bad some of the external activities are. No one wants to log into the application each day or deal with the pre-registration for each event. The current first anniversary claw machine takes this to another level. I actually made this video intending to mention it at some point, it just didn't feel natural in the script. For those unaware, the issue with this event is there's a set number of prizes each day, and they all reset at midnight Pacific time. Based off your time zone, this is obviously either going to be really good or really bad. It just sucks that a lot of people can't get it without rearranging their life. I will give them props for addressing these concerns. I don't think the approach was perfect, but they at least tried something. I also did end up winning one of these prizes. Those interested in the contents didn't expect an unboxing short when I get the package, but it really doesn't change my feelings. I also should note I won this on day 2, so it's definitely not something where I have like an axe to grind. It just, I think it's a problem. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, and for more content, please subscribe.